All right, everybody. Hello, Mr. Mack here. Tonight I'm here because I want to talk to you about a literary device called figurative language. I love figurative language because I love a great story, a great book. I love to write. And great authors use figurative language because they don't want to be boring. Literal, when you are using literal language, it's not that it's boring. Literal language is when you're stating a fact, when you're saying something is. For instance, if I were to say, he is fast, and if I were to say, she is really fast, well, that's great. I mean, that's literal. Maybe she's a bit faster than him, who knows? But it's a little bit boring. But if I were to use a bit of figurative language, if I were to use a simile, simile is when you compare two things using like or as in the sentence. I could say, well, he's as fast as a cheetah. Or I could say, she runs like a cheetah. Well, that's a simile. That's what similes do. A good author paints a picture with words. It's just a more precise way, I think, to state something. It's a more colorful way, a more imaginative way to state something. That's what a simile is. Remember, a simile is a sentence using like or as, comparing two things. It's as simple as that. A metaphor is another bit of figurative language. It's the same thing as a simile, except you're not using like or as. You're actually using like some awesome verbs like is, was, were, are in a sentence. You're saying something is something. You're comparing two things. General Ulysses S. Grant in the Civil War, and he became a president later, was a very brave guy. So literally, I could say General Grant was brave. Well, that's great. That's stating a fact. That's literal. But I could say General Grant was a lion on the battlefield. That's a metaphor. I'm comparing him to a lion. Brave. That's what bravery is. That's what a metaphor is. Comparing two things, not using like or as. When you're saying something is something, or something was something, or something, that's a metaphor. Awesome. Alliteration, you guys have been, you know what alliteration is. And if you don't, if you're not sure, if you're thinking, what is it? I know it. Then nursery rhymes, poems, songs, they all employ this literary device. They all use alliteration. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Both of them are using alliteration. What do you notice in common with both of those little ditties? They both have the same, each word has the same beginning sound. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, how many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick? That's alliteration. Just using words that have the same. It's a cool, awesome way. It's a literary device, poetic device, using it in poems. It just has them bounce off the tongue, makes them easier to remember. Alliteration is an awesome bit of figurative language. Personification. As soon as I get my card up here. Personification is when you attach human-like qualities to an inanimate object or something non-living. For instance, if there's a band playing or there's loud music playing, and I could say, wow, the vibrations from that music vibrated my pencil. My pencil's moving. Well, that's great, stating a fact, making it literal. But if I were to say, the vibrations from that loud music made my pencil dance across the desk, well, I've just used personification. I gave the pencil, I personified the pencil. Think of personification, the name person. The word person is in personification. You can see person there. Means human-like qualities given to something. So I'm basically saying the pencil danced. It didn't, but we know what when somebody says the pencil danced across the desk, we know it bounced across the desk. We're not taking it literally. Anyway, so that's personification. Awesome. An idiom is a saying. It's one of those sayings that we use all the time. I use idioms all the time. I'll pass something out to my class and I'll say, listen, we just went over this. You guys got this. It's a piece of cake. And when I say that, my students know what I mean. I'm simply saying, for you, because you know this information, this is going to be easy. It's a piece of cake. You might say something like, you know what, gosh, you can say that again. Well, what do you think? What am I really saying when I say you can say that again? I'm basically saying, you know what, I agree with you. But I'm using that idiom. You can say that again. What if I were to say, your guess is as good as mine? What am I really saying there? I'm saying, I don't know. So, using an idiom, your parents do, grandparents do, uncles, aunts, and you use an idiom. A penny saved is a penny earned. They're all idioms. Even a theme, like slow and steady wins the race from the tortoise and the hare, Aesop's fable. It's definitely also an idiom in addition to being a theme, a lesson. But anyway, idiom. Onomatopoeia. Look at that word. Onomatopoeia. I wonder whoever decided to spell that word, but onomatopoeia. Think about what onomatopoeia is, and maybe think with your ears. And the reason I say that is because onomatopoeia, it's just sound words. That's all it is. This big, gigantic word just means sounds written down. Like in a story, if the phone rings, ring is onomatopoeia. If a character is cooking bacon and it's sizzled in past tense, is onomatopoeia. Boing, if a spring bounces, boing is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia, this big word, simply means sounds. That's all it is. And you can make them up too. Comic books have bam, bip, bop. Onomatopoeia. And finally for today, try to pronounce that word. Most of you will say hyperbole. It isn't. It's hyperbole. Students use hyperbole a lot. Kids use hyperbole a lot. And so do adults. It's a fish story. It's a high exaggeration. If I were to say something to you or somebody said something, I've told you 1,000,000 times to clean up that room, well, that's using hyperbole. You're exaggerating it. Nobody says something 1,000,000 times, but you're putting a finer point on it. You're basically letting the person know, I've told you enough. If somebody were to say, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, well, that's hyperbole too. You're not really going to eat a horse. You're just basically saying what? I'm very hungry. Now, you could be literal and you could be boring. You could just say I'm hungry. Or you could just say, listen, I told you yesterday to clean your room. Well, yeah. But I would probably go with this hyperbole thing. I use hyperbole a lot. You know, you blurt it out 52,000 times. Yeah. Hyperbole. So that's it. That is figurative language, and that's what you have to know. So come back to this video if you need it. If you're working on anything that has to do with figurative language and you're not sure about a simile or metaphor or something, come back, visit, and take care.